So now I'm asking on the stage Estonian entrepreneur Risto Rossar. The stage is yours.
Hello, hello. The microphone works, great. Yeah, I'm the entrepreneur. I'm not a biologist. I think understanding money and society is kind of my hobby. And like for me, it seems that what's happening here is not only pandemic, it is like the problem in a much bigger scale. And there is some hidden, it's like smoke and mirrors, and you don't see what's happening behind the smoke and mirrors. And I think that's what I would like to a little bit open up here, that actually the problem is much more bigger than that virus. No, I'm again, what's this? No, it worked when we tested. What the heck? Okay. So yeah, let me start with that quote. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And you can rephrase it also like this. And it's quite obvious that the Western world seems to be in the last stage of that cycle. And now comes the number. As we have been always talked about COVID number, I have another number to you. So the cost of COVID-19 restriction in the year 2000 for an average Estonian working person was 8,500 euros. And of course, that's wrong because you cannot calculate it exactly. But let me walk you through my logic behind that number, and then you can decide whether you believe in it or not. So that's the model. 1.6 billion was a decrease of GDP in 1 year. 2.5 billion was the amount of money that the Estonian government borrowed and spent during 1 year. 2.9 billion was the Estonian share in the European money printing program. You add these three numbers together, you end up with 7. That's 7 billion. And now you divide it with a number of Estonian working population, employed and unemployed, everyone, and you end up with 8,500 euros. So you can do a lot with that money. Now, for example, you can double teachers' salaries for 15 years with that annual cost. Yeah, I think what we as human beings are quite bad doing is evaluating the benefits today against costs in the future, specifically when these costs happen to the anonymous persons. And you probably have all heard about the famous Marshmallow Experiment done by Stanford University, when the child gets one marshmallow and when he waits for a few minutes without eating that, then he gets another one. Most child cannot resist the temptation to eat that marshmallow within a few minutes. And I think that's what's happening for us in a very big scale. We are going through the Marshmallow Experiment and failing quite badly as a society in that. But let's now zoom up a little bit. Because Estonia is a small thing, I think what's actually affecting us is what's happening on a global scale. Let me start with the basics. There are two ways how to run the country, two extreme ways how to run the country. One is anarcho-capitalism, also named as Austrian economics, where state participation is close to zero. The main principle behind that is a non-aggression principle. You cannot use any force towards other person or against their property for your benefit. That seems logical, right? It seems like a normal thing to assume, unless you acknowledge that taxation is a strong violation of non-aggression principle. On the other extreme, you have socialism, where let's say state share is something like 80%. It's never 100. And in that case, in principle, all of your benefit is taken away and divided by among the society. And now let's look at the facts. So in principle, what it is I'd say more successful the country is, the more socialistic it becomes. We all think that China is a really socialistic country, but look at the number of China. So it's much more capitalistic than the whole Western world together. I'm not saying that China is good. There are other problems there. So what spending does? Spending is a proxy for government control. And the more government is spending, more false signals it is sending to the market. And if there are more false signals, the price signals are taken away, then the economy gets structurally weaker. You are bailing out failing companies. You are supporting lazy people not working. And that's kind of seems like a noble thing to do. But the structure becomes weaker. And the weaker the structure becomes, the more government intervention is needed. And you end up with let's say, ever-growing governments. Today, Federal Reserve is the single biggest investor in the world. Let's say, let that sink in for a minute. It's one state institution that owns the biggest amount of assets. But it's not only the spending through what government is controlling us, it is also regulation. And so that's the picture that illustrates it really well. The Obama Healthcare Act consists of almost 900 documents, over 20,000 pages of regulation. Social Security Act of 1935, 29 pages. So that's one law. And now think about it, we have many laws. And now let's say how it all relates to the COVID. So it relates so that think about being, let's say, the restaurant owner today. How much of your economic success is actually depending on you? It's in principle the government which is running your business. And do we want to live in that kind of environment? But let's move on. The second kind of trends that I would like to bring on the table is skin in the game. So I'm personally also making a lot of investments, and there are two things that I usually look at. One is the competence of the leader, and the other is, do the leader have the skin in the game? Whether you invest money or you give your vote to someone. So if these two things are not in place, then usually things tend to go sour, right? Now let's explore the COVID decisions a little bit. Now we know the number, 8,500 euros. The right question should have been what we should have asked from the voters. Let's close down the economy, and I will contribute 8,500 euros for the state budget, and then state can give it to everyone in need. Option B, let's keep the economy open, and I will take that risk of, in my case, 0.015% of dying to the COVID. So if that would have been the question, what would have been chosen? Most likely option B, but I could be wrong. The question that we actually asked. Let's close down the economy. The state will pay for all the costs and salaries. Maybe some capitalists need to take some losses, but actually government is also compensating these ones. You can spend time with your family, watch Netflix, and you are the real hero fighting the COVID war. That was option A. Option B, let's keep the economy open and we will have streets full of dead bodies and we act really irresponsibly. We frame this way, like, of course, it's option B, right? Now, in principle, like all of our, you can even do it so that there is that Zoom class that's actually even winning out of that. You can imagine a lot of people in our society for whom this COVID decision were really beneficial. You can work at home. These are, let's say, politicians, investors, entrepreneurs, scientists. Like they didn't suffer a lot. Life for them maybe even became a little bit better. but who got the hit were the working class. Now let's say, and half of our economy is actually run by the technocrats, by the people who doesn't have skin in the game. And there's that famous quote from Isaiah Berlin novel, "The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows only one big thing." And our COVID decisions have been only done by the hedgehogs. And we have even these celebrity hedgehogs, like Krista Fischer in Estonia and Neil Ferguson from UK, and we believe them. So these are the hedgehogs, and they're smart people. They do their thing, they do their models. These are correct from only one point of view. But running a country, if you run a country like a science, then you end up with a centrally planned economy, right? Running a country is a politics. You need to take into account, let's say, a lot of things. And that's why you need a leader, you need a fox in making these decisions, not the hedgehogs. Otherwise, the decision is too narrow. Now, to my kind of favorite topic, what's money? And money plays really important role in our society. And I would say that the more honest the monetary policy is, the more honest the society is. Because if you think what's actually happening during the countries of hyperinflation, so it's not only the money that is getting devalued, it is also the trust to the institution, the trust to the government, and also trust among individuals that is getting strongly devalued. Because government is in principle legitimating the theft in a very big scale. And that's what at the moment we are doing here. And it kind of always ends the same way. There is no exception in the history. There are some interesting pictures that captured my attention recently. Top right corner is the average period of the global reserve currencies. So that's always between 80 and 100 years. US dollar has been around for 100 years approximately. On the left, on the bottom, you see on the left side, there is the amount of silver in the coins of the Roman Empire on an inverted scale. So it goes to zero at one point. Here, of course, you see the Federal Reserve balance sheet. So there are some similarities in these pictures. And maybe this time we have invented that perpetual motion, but I have a serious doubt that that's the case. The next topic is economic inequality, because that's like actually one serious problem, and because that's usually the source of revolutions in the history. And we have made to believe that capitalism and free markets are the cause of economic inequality. That's what we have been learning at our university. What's of course mostly written, the economic books are written by John Maynard Keynes, who is like socialist in my opinion. But whose fault it actually is? These are actually central banks. So the main source of economic inequality comes from the central banks. There is a famous theory called Cantillon effect. And what it means is that money printing itself doesn't create the wealth or destroy that. It's just a number, right? It doesn't really matter whether bread costs €1 or 10,000 euros. It's irrelevant. But what that money printing does is that the ones who win out of money printings are the ones who get the money first. The ones who lose out of money printing are the ones who get it last, after the prices have already risen. So now think about how the money enters the economy. It enters the economy through banking sector, through Wall Street, through central bank buying of all kind of assets. Now, in principle, new money is handed out to investors, the banks. And then the working man gets his salary increase after the price of bread has already risen. So it's like a very strong redistribution of income. And COVID has made that last 20 years work within 1 year. And these guys, they have deserved probably half of their money. The other half have been just transferred them through the money printing program. And the real problem is that 45% of all the population has no investable assets. So these are the guys who are guaranteed to lose out of that extreme money printing program because their salaries and savings are being just taken away from them. Yeah, let's move. And if you still don't believe in that, there's another chart. And that was like really shocking to me when I discovered that. The average working man is no better off than he was 50 years ago. There's two numbers here. Blue one is the real GDP per capita. So see, they have been like going nicely together. And from after 1971, the average salary, the median salary of the working man in the United States is flat. So we have invented these mobile phones and, scientists have done a lot of work. GDP has gone out, but nothing, no progress. What happened in 1971? There's actually a website, what the fuck happened in 1971. The dollar was removed from the gold standard. You see, so it's like all the money was just, are not reached average working man, but someone else. So these are the investors and capitalists. But that's not the fault of free market. That's the fault of a socialist institution called central bank. Now let's explore all of that in a COVID decision. Remember that decision that we asked and how we frame that. What actually has happened? So most investors have kind of doubled their wealth. The average working man is about to get his invoice with inflation and wiping out of their savings. There is a lot of hidden costs, depression, suicide, not treated persons, famine. And the cost of saved life from COVID-19 is, according to my calculation, approaching infinity. Because there is no correlation. That's the chart of stringency index and total deaths per million. So I don't see any correlation there. So I thought I will calculate that price, but that was impossible to calculate because that's like forever. And there are charts like UK and Sweden. Now, let's say these charts look pretty much the same. These are the deaths per million person. Yeah, okay, maybe to got even more interesting, what the future might bring us. I think that's the last slide that I have. So, that's not coming easily. So I have two scenarios. Of course, it goes differently. It never goes how I think. But first option is a distrust of institution. So we just don't trust that government institution anymore, and we move to the completely decentralized system. Step by step, we replace banks with cryptocurrency. We remove central banks from the value chain. We replace centralized media with a decentralized media. And maybe we have a nice future ahead because of that. But the system will fight back. So that's quite obvious. And then we have Orwell 1984. So we see big inflation. What's next? The government will do price ceilings because you need to protect somehow. Then we have a currency exchange restriction to protect the customer. And we have censorship. And we create this kind of false sense of security, what we have kind of created here anyway. Yeah. And I think the good thing is that after that last cycle ends, we go back here. Hard times create capitalists, and that's actually much more fun environment to be than living on a state support and watching Netflix. Thank you very much.